Hello, I know there's been many people really eager to see this video, so I finally made this. So I recently made this video of me showing my Hairtrigger mod or testing it, and this is not a guide. I'm just showing how I basically did it. So if you actually are going to try this, I really recommend you seeing the guide on airsoftforum.com, the Zuzaku's Hairtrigger guide. And before you try anything, you really have to understand how the trigger mechanism works, because if you don't, you pretty much can't do anything about it. So that's very important. So this is my DSG gearbox for my CAC PDV, and I'm just gonna open up the gearbox now, or not yet. I'm just gonna quickly show what the trigger pull is like. So this, I measured it, it's about just a little bit under 1 millimeter at the tip of the trigger, and it functions fine. The safety works, and semi-auto works just fine, and full auto. So yeah. This is an M160 spring from Airsoft Pro. It's a bit dark. I'm gonna put on this light. I hope this isn't too bright. Yeah. These parts aren't necessary here. Where I'm gonna start here. Obviously, you don't need the gears now yet. Also, this video is about getting rid of overspin, specifically on DSG builds. Now this gearbox is running on a 14.8 volt LiPo at about 65 RPS, and the semi-auto works just fine. So it's not like double shooting or anything, and the trigger isn't jamming, or yeah, you can do that at this speed. Yeah. So this is an SHS cutoff lever. I did some modifications to it that are not actually directly related to the Hairtrigger mod, but to get rid of the chance of a trigger jam, I shape optimized this cam here so that it doesn't pull the cutoff lever any higher up than necessary, and also is released back to its this position. I mean, as soon as possible the sector gear has passed it, so it just quickly does this instead of like slowly returning to the normal position. Now what that does is it prevents it from leaving like halfway there, and then the trigger wouldn't work. So yeah, this is a low neck trigger. It's a regular M4 trigger, nothing special. I just bought this because the original trigger by D-Boys was a bit worn out, and it was a bit difficult to work with at this point, so I decided to get a new one. Whoops. Yeah. Now, as I said before, I really recommend you reading the guide on Airsoft forum about the Hairtrigger, so that you understand what basically I'm doing here. But anyway, this is the trigger. As you can see, it looks a bit unusual at the front. It's because that blue piece is plastic and it's there to basically limit the trigger pull of the trigger to what is necessary, and where it's actually hitting is that's a steel pin that I drilled through the gearbox, and just to make sure that it stays in place, I glued a plastic piece next to it, so that piece actually blocks this part right here. And also on the gearbox here is that steel piece that I glued on. Now, if you have a speed trigger or the Leilax trigger that has those set screws here and here, you don't necessarily need to do anything like this, because you can just use the screws to limit that trigger pull. But I don't like those triggers. They look ugly to me, so I just use these normal ones instead. And what next? Just gonna take this screw out here. The threads here are kinda stripped, so I'm not sure. Yeah, it's come out. Now, I basically used the guide as a base. I just kind of looked around and how he did his modifications, and kind of made my own of that. Now here's the trigger trolley. Please focus. I have this steel pin here. It's a 2mm pin. It's not like one of those pins that the guy used in his guide, but I mean, this is a solid steel pin, and it's positioned so that it's kinda sitting lower than the original lip here that is engaged by the cutoff lever. Now that is because that's not necessary unless you wanna get rid of overspin. So this is basically like sitting as low as it can, so that when the trigger is pulled on full auto, the cutoff lever just barely misses this. So it's basically like on semi-auto, the trolley is released as soon as the sector gear hits the cutoff lever. So that basically kinda adjusts the cutoff point to an earlier point, and because on a DSG the spring load is extremely high at the end, so even a small change will make a huge difference in the overspin, because on DSGs the cutoff lever is actually engaged before the spring is released, just a small moment before. So now it's releasing even more early. So yeah, there is much less overspin. and this plastic piece here at the end is to adjust the what is it called, the normal position of the trolley, so that it's sitting as far forward as it can, so that it's not hitting the contacts. And also Lonex gearbox is one of those that, now this is the first generation, I believe they have fixed it, but the very typical version 2 gearbox problem is that the pin breaks off that stops the trolley, so that's not a big of an issue. Just drill a hole and add a screw in its place and you're good to go. Now that screw is, as you can see, it's flattened the other side a bit, so to tweak the position to a perfection. Not perfection, but it works. Nothing is never perfect. And the contacts here, they're not like in the guide. They're just flat instead of like angled at the top. Now that isn't always necessary. That would depend on how high is the lip on your trigger. Right here, mine is so that you basically have to shave down this top to as low as it can be, so that it still engages the trolley. Now this, it's not exactly like this in the in real life. It's more like this. And when the cutoff lever engages this trolley, it will lift up like this and sit on an angle. Now in the guide you can see that the contacts are bent in an angle just because of this. If this is much higher, so that it needs to lift into much higher angle, it will still contact. But when you shave down this to as minimum as possible, it's not completely necessary, because the angle doesn't change that much. And also this top part here, you need to polish it, and the angle must match with the angle of the bottom of this in the release position, so that it can slide very easily, so that it will reset more easily. And what else? Then you must bend the contacts so that it connects as soon as possible, but there is obviously some limit at how soon is safe. In total, the switch trolley travel length is about 0.6 millimeters on this particular case. If I just put it back here, the fit is kind of tight because of the screw. At least it's not going anywhere. Now, when this gearbox is opened, it doesn't show as well. I mean, not as accurately as when it's closed, but this is about 0.6 millimeters before it contacts. So that's a really small amount. And you don't really need to use a different trolley like in the guide if you do it like this. And also you need to limit the travel length of the trigger trolley so that it can't go any deeper than necessary. Now how I did that is, where this part of the trolley goes into the second part of the switch, there is like a hole where it goes. and so I put a plastic piece in there. I'm not sure if you can even see it in the video because it's the same color as the rest of the switch, but you can kinda see it in there. Let me show where. There. In that hole, so that it blocks the trolley movement, and that remove the risk of overpulling the trigger, unless you have adjusted the trigger movement area. You cannot overpull the trigger anyway, but if you haven't done that yet, you could possibly bend the contacts away from what you adjusted them to, so you would have to redo it again. So it's kinda not necessary, but I just did that originally. I don't quite often plan in advance my things that I do. I just, as I go, I do the changes, and some things I did later turn out not to be all that important. But I'm just showing here what I have basically done here. Now, what else is necessary? Now, the cutoff lever. You don't actually need to do anything to this cutoff lever because you can just modify the part on the trolley. In the guide, you can see that he tells to file down this part here on this side, but it's not actually even necessary, because you can do it on this part instead, in the steel part. My camera is having trouble focusing again. So here's the cutoff lever. That's basically what I did to it. So that as soon as the knob on the sector gear, with the lever on it, passes next to it, this will return a reset. Yeah, is there anything else? Yeah, the safety cam here. You basically have to build up material on top of this arm here, or it actually depends on your specs, so that it will completely block the trigger from moving. It's very important, because if it moves even a little bit, you might actually still fire the gun on safety. So now this is the last thing you need to do, so this is not all that important at this point. That's a Tokyo Marui cutoff lever that I used before I got the SHS steel one. So I really recommend you using a steel cutoff lever, and also the pin for this must be steel, so that it will last long. Because these are the zinc, and they will wear, eventually will wear, because of the steel. Now also this isn't obviously the cutoff lever that I'm using, but it's so similar that I'm just gonna use this to demonstrate. Come on, focus. You have to find you have to basically file down this part of the pin here, so that when you switch to full auto, the cutoff lever just barely misses it when it's turned up, so that way on semi-auto, when you fire the gun, you have the maximum contact area with the top of this lip and the bottom of this pin. Now when the trigger pull is like 0.6 millimeters, the contact area is like 0.4 or 3. So you really want the parts to be steel so that they will last, because the load is in such a small area. You might even wanna have to put some lubrication on there so it will function smoother. So yeah, I kind of forgot to say about the safety lever, that in some part combinations you might actually have to shave down this arm if you end up setting the resting position of the trigger so far forward that the original arm cannot go up completely. So you might have to shave it, or you might have to add material. It will depend on the parts you're using. And just to show the difference between the original and the, it is much smaller now. I also have a quite strong spring on here. Now that's not necessary completely, but I just like to use it that way, so it will reset every time. As you can see here, it's not lifting up very high. Now this is already higher than is actually even needed. I could make it much smaller already, or much smaller than it is now, but you can see here that how it resets like so fast that there's really small chance of a jam. So here you can see when it releases. So it's just before the release of the piston. Yeah. Now, is there anything more? I think that's about it about this one. Then there's one thing that I promised to do many months ago. I've been very busy and tired, so just gonna take down this. I have my motor here. I basically, in the beginning of this year, a pair of prototype magnets from an Airsoft mechanics user, Kingdom of Yah, or Yah, whatever. And he sent me a pair of those magnets. They are high temperature neodymium magnets, basically the strongest neodymium magnets that have high temperature rating available. So you can kind of see them in there. I'm not gonna take them out because this motor is so running nicely and the pinion is secured down so tight that I'm not really eager to take it off. But the magnets are great. They are in strength much better than my SHS and Element, and quite comparable to the Systema ones. But obviously these are not gonna lose their magnetism like the Systema ones if your motor gets hot. And actually this motor has been getting a bit hot, because now this is a Franken-Torque motor and I'm running on a 10 to 1 gear set on a 14.8 volt and Franken-Torque on a partially spacered M160 spring. So the motor is really working hard. So when I'm semi-tapping or firing a lot of semi, the motor does get a bit hot at some point. So the motor has gone a bit more hot than I would like. So but the magnets are still perfectly survived, and I really don't feel any loss in magnetism. So great magnets. Now about testing your Hairtrigger, I showed in the video that I have this multimeter. Now many of these have this function, this diode thing with that noise logo. What it will basically do is, when I connect these wires, it will make a beep, and if you have MOSFET, what you just do is you hook up, it doesn't matter which way around you but the wires, but the second for the red wire and the other for the signal wire, like this. And very important is, when you test the trigger pull, the gearbox must be closed. That is important, because otherwise it will be misleading. Now I'm not showing you that because I have already done that, but that's probably the last thing about this worth mentioning. Yeah, so that's about it then. So I hope this will help you with your Hairtrigger projects, and if you need help, just send me a message or just comment in this video, and I will try to help you. And last thing is, if you're not sure about what you're doing, if you try this, don't try it. You have to understand how this works completely, because without knowing, you cannot tweak it, you cannot adjust it. So this is pretty advanced technical stuff, but I don't know how skilled my viewers are. I mean, there are probably some good techs out there, and some that are still learning, but so it will take some time to get this work nice and reliably and without any issues. So yeah, thank you for watching. Please share this video and all that kind of stuff if you find this interesting or useful. So see you later.